The crimson moons of Xirian cast eerie shadows across the crystalline canyon walls as Sergeant Marcus Chen adjusted his plasma rifle's scope. 3 years into humanity's first deep space colonization mission, and he was stuck playing exterminator on a planet that seemed designed to kill everything that breathed oxygen. The mining colony of New Terra had been reporting livestock disappearances for weeks. Massive claw marks scarred the metallic barriers around the settlement, and several automated defense turrets had been found melted into slag. The colonists whispered about a white death that moved through the night, but Marcus had dismissed their fears as typical frontier paranoia. That was before he saw the footage. Security cameras had captured glimpses of something impossibly large and pale moving through the outer perimeter. The creature's body stretched nearly 40 feet from snout to tail, covered in scales that seemed to absorb and reflect light simultaneously. Its wings, when briefly visible, spanned wider than the colony's main transport shuttles. But what made Marcus's blood run cold were its eyes, intelligent, calculating, and filled with an ancient fury that spoke of millennia spent as an apex predator. The locals called it the bone dragon, though xenobiologists insisted no reptilian life should exist on Xirian. The planet's atmosphere contained trace amounts of methane and sulfur compounds that should have been toxic to most carbon-based life forms. Yet here was a creature that not only survived but thrived in this hostile environment. Marcus had volunteered for the hunting expedition partly out of duty and partly out of curiosity. Humanity had encountered various alien species during their expansion into the galaxy, but most were either primitive or had long since achieved technological transcendence. This dragon represented something different, a being that had evolved naturally to become the ultimate predator on a world that challenged even human engineering. The hunting party consisted of 5 Marines, all veterans of the Centauri conflicts, equipped with the latest in military hardware. Their plan was simple: track the creature to its lair, study its behavior patterns, and neutralize the threat with minimal environmental damage. The colonial administration wanted the creature alive if possible, hoping its unique biology might yield advances in adaptive medicine or environmental suits. Marcus crouched behind a formation of black volcanic rock, watching the entrance to a massive cave system that thermal scans indicated was the dragon's primary residence. His suit's environmental readings showed temperatures inside the cave reaching nearly 200 degrees Celsius, with atmospheric pressure fluctuations that would crush an unprotected human in seconds. "Contact," whispered Corporal Rodriguez through the comm channel. Movement at the eastern cavern mouth, approximately 300 meters from Chen's position. Through his scope, Marcus caught his first clear view of the creature. The dragon emerged from the darkness like a living glacier, its albino scales catching the moonlight and scattering it into prismatic patterns across the canyon walls. Each step it took created small tremors that Marcus felt through his boots, and, when it stretched its neck to scent the air, its head rose nearly 20 feet above the ground. The creature was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. Its body was perfectly proportioned for both terrestrial and aerial combat, with massive haunches that spoke of incredible ground speed and wing structures that defied conventional understanding of aerodynamics. Razor-sharp spines ran along its back, each one large enough to impale a human, and its tail ended in a cluster of bone spikes that could probably punch through tank armor. But it was the dragon's behavior that truly impressed Marcus. The creature wasn't simply wandering randomly, it was patrolling its territory with military precision. It moved in calculated patterns, pausing at specific locations to test the air with forked tongues that emerged from its massive jaws. When it detected something of interest, its head would tilt with an almost bird-like curiosity, processing information with obvious intelligence. "This isn't just an animal," Marcus whispered into his calm. "This thing thinks." The dragon's patrol brought it closer to the marine positions, and Marcus got his first look at the creature's legendary eyes. They were larger than dinner plates, with pupils that contracted to vertical slits in the moonlight. But their color was what made Marcus suppress a shiver. They were the pale blue of Arctic ice, cold and ancient and utterly alien. Those eyes swept across the landscape with predatory focus, and, for a heart-stopping moment, Marcus was certain they had locked onto his position. The dragon's massive head turned in his direction, nostrils flaring as it processed scents carried on the night wind. Marcus held his breath, knowing that his suit's stealth systems were designed for human detection methods, not whatever sensory capabilities this creature possessed. The standoff lasted nearly 30 seconds before the dragon apparently dismissed the Marines as unimportant and continued its patrol. Marcus released his breath slowly, realizing that he had just experienced his first encounter with a being that could have killed him without effort but had chosen not to, either out of disinterest or because it hadn't perceived him as a threat worth its attention. "All units, maintain position," Marcus commanded. "We observe and record only until we understand its patterns." Over the next several hours, the hunting party documented the dragon's behavior with scientific precision. The creature maintained a territory of roughly 50 square kilometers, making regular circuits that brought it past known water sources and areas where local wildlife congregated. It hunted with surgical efficiency, taking only what it needed and leaving minimal evidence of its presence. Most surprisingly, the dragon showed signs of tool use and environmental modification. It had deliberately arranged rocks to create windbreaks around its cave system, and it used its massive claws to carve channels that directed rainwater into natural cisterns. This wasn't just intelligence, it was engineering. As dawn approached, the dragon retreated into its cave system, but not before performing what could only be described as a territorial display. It reared up on its hind legs, spread its wings to their full impressive span, and released a roar that shook dust from the canyon walls. The sound was impossibly deep and complex, containing harmonic frequencies that seemed designed to carry for hundreds of miles. Marcus felt the roar in his chest cavity, and his suit's audio dampeners automatically engaged to prevent hearing damage. But, even filtered, the sound carried emotional weight, pride, warning, and something that might have been loneliness. "Did anyone else hear that?" asked Private Thompson, the team's youngest member. "We all heard it," Marcus replied. "The question is what it meant." "Sounded like a challenge," suggested Rodriguez. Marcus wasn't so sure. He had spent enough time in combat zones to recognize the difference between aggression and communication. The dragon's roar had contained too much complexity for simple territorial posturing. It was trying to convey information, though whether to potential mates, rivals, or something else entirely remained unclear. As the team prepared to return to base camp for analysis and planning, Marcus found himself looking back at the cave entrance one last time. Somewhere in those depths was a creature that represented everything humanity thought it understood about apex predation and evolutionary success. The dragon had survived on a world that challenged human technology, maintained a complex territory, and demonstrated problem-solving abilities that suggested genuine intelligence. But humanity hadn't come this far into space to be intimidated by natural selection, no matter how impressive its results. The colonists needed protection, and the dragon represented a threat that couldn't be ignored indefinitely. Marcus just hoped that when the confrontation came, human ingenuity would prove superior to millions of years of evolutionary perfection. The return journey to base camp took 3 hours through terrain that seemed designed to test human endurance. Zirion's landscape was a study in geological violence, jagged rock formations created by ancient volcanic activity, crystalline deposits that could slice through standard body armor, and atmospheric pressure variations that made every step a calculated risk. Marcus used the travel time to review the night's recordings on his suit's internal display. The dragon's movements followed patterns that suggested not just intelligence but strategic thinking. It had avoided areas where human scent was strongest, maintained visual contact with multiple escape routes during its hunting, and demonstrated what appeared to be long-term planning in its territorial modifications. "Sergeant," called out Lieutenant Hayes, the expedition's second-in-command. "Command wants a preliminary report as soon as we reach communications range." Marcus nodded, already formulating his assessment. "How did you explain to colonial administrators that they were dealing with something that might be as intelligent as they were, but with physical capabilities that dwarfed human achievements?" The dragon wasn't just a predator to be eliminated, it was a being that had mastered its environment in ways that human colonists could barely comprehend. Base camp consisted of a cluster of prefabricated structures arranged in a defensive perimeter, powered by compact fusion generators and protected by automated defense systems. It represented the pinnacle of human engineering applied to frontier survival, yet Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that the dragon could reduce it to molten metal in minutes if it chose to do so. The command tent buzzed with activity as the hunting party uploaded their data streams to the main computer systems. Holographic displays showed thermal imaging of the dragon, audio analysis of its roar, and detailed topographical maps of its territory. The accumulated evidence painted a picture of a creature that defied easy categorization.
Recommendations, Sergeant, asked Colonel Peterson, the mission commander.
Marcus studied the data one more time before responding.
Sir, we're not dealing with a simple predator.
This creature demonstrates advanced intelligence, territorial planning, and behavioral complexity that suggests we should approach it as we would any sentient species.
Are you suggesting we attempt communication? I'm suggesting we proceed with extreme caution.
Our weapons can probably kill it, but we've seen what it can do to our defensive installations.
If we provoke it unnecessarily, we might trigger a response that puts the entire colony at risk.
Peterson frowned at the tactical displays.
The colonists are already at risk. Livestock losses are accelerating, and our perimeter defenses are failing. We need a solution that prioritizes human lives.
Marcus understood the colonel's position, but something about the knight's observations bothered him. The dragon had opportunities to attack human settlements but had chosen instead to focus on natural prey species.
Its behavior suggested restraint rather than aggression, as if it was trying to avoid unnecessary conflict.
Sir, request permission to attempt a controlled contact scenario. If the creature is as intelligent as our data suggests, it might be possible to establish boundaries that protect both the colony and the dragon's territory.
Negative, Sergeant.
The risk assessment doesn't support diplomatic contact with an unknown predator species.
We proceed with elimination protocols.
Marcus felt a surge of disappointment but recognized the military logic behind the decision.
Human lives took precedence over xenobiological preservation, regardless of how remarkable the creature might be.
Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to make a terrible mistake. The elimination plan called for the use of orbital bombardment to collapse the dragon's cave system, followed by ground assault teams to confirm the kill. It was efficient, decisive, and completely removed any possibility of learning from what might be the most remarkable creature humanity had yet encountered. As the team prepared for the final assault, Marcus found himself hoping that the dragon's intelligence would serve it well enough to escape what was coming.
Some things were too magnificent to destroy, even when duty demanded it.
He had no idea that the dragon had been listening to their radio communications for days, learning their language and preparing its own response to the threat they represented. The chase begins. The orbital strike came at dawn, turning the crystalline canyon into a hellscape of superheated plasma and collapsing rock. From his observation post 3 kilometers away, Marcus watched through polarized filters as the dragon's ancient home disappeared under tons of molten stone.
The bombardment continued for 12 minutes, long enough to ensure that nothing could have survived in the cave system.
But, when the dust settled and the thermal imaging cleared, they discovered their first miscalculation.
The dragon was gone. How is that possible? Colonel Peterson demanded over the comm channel. We had thermal locks on the entire cave system.
Nothing that large should have been able to escape undetected. Marcus studied the crater where the cave entrance had been, noting the peculiar patterns in the debris field. Some of the rocks showed signs of having been moved from within, as if something had pushed its way out during the bombardment rather than being crushed by it. Sir, I'm seeing evidence of tunnel systems we didn't detect on our initial scans.
The dragon may have had multiple escape routes prepared. Find it, Sergeant.
That creature is now a wounded animal, and wounded animals are exponentially more dangerous. The search began immediately, with teams of Marines spreading out across the devastated landscape using every sensor array at their disposal. Marcus led Alpha Team along the eastern ridge, following thermal signatures that might indicate recent dragon presence. The orbital strike had left the entire area radiating heat, making conventional tracking nearly impossible. It was Private Thompson who spotted the first sign.
Sergeant, you need to see this.
Marcus joined the young Marine at the edge of a crystalline outcropping, where something impossible had been carved into the rock face. The symbols were clearly artificial angular markings arranged in complex patterns that suggested written language. But they were still warm to the touch, created recently with something hot enough to melt crystal without shattering it.
Can anyone read this? Marcus asked, activating his helmet's recording systems.
It looks almost mathematical, suggested Corporal Rodriguez.
See these repeated elements?
They might be numerical values or coordinate systems. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with Zirian's morning temperature.
If the dragon was leaving messages, it wasn't just intelligent, it was trying to communicate.
The timing suggested these symbols had been created after the bombardment, which meant the creature was not only alive but actively responding to human aggression. The hunt continued for 6 hours before they found their first real clue. Massive claw marks scored the surface of a metallic ridge, arranged in patterns that suggested the dragon had been moving at incredible speed. The gouges were deep enough to indicate desperate urgency, but their spacing suggested controlled movement rather than panicked flight. It's not running randomly, Marcus realized aloud. These marks show deliberate direction changes, like it's following a planned route. Planned route to where? Asked Lieutenant Hayes. Marcus consulted his tactical display, overlaying the claw marks with topographical data. The dragon's path led directly toward the human settlement, but it wasn't taking the most direct route. Instead, it was following terrain that provided maximum cover while maintaining multiple escape options. It's heading for the colony, but it's moving like a soldier rather than an animal. The implications sent ice through Marcus's veins. If the dragon possessed both intelligence and military thinking, the colonists weren't facing a wild beast driven by pain and anger. They were dealing with a strategic opponent that understood human tactics and was planning accordingly. All teams, converge on my position. We're changing from search and destroy to intercept and engage. The race began in earnest as human technology matched itself against millions of years of evolutionary refinement. Marcus's team moved at maximum sustainable pace across terrain that challenged even their advanced mobility systems, while somewhere ahead of them, an injured dragon navigated the same landscape using nothing but natural ability. They found the first evidence of the dragon's condition 3 kilometers from the colony perimeter. Dark stains on crystalline formations indicated significant bleeding, and the spacing between claw marks suggested the creature was favoring its left side. The orbital bombardment had wounded it, but apparently not enough to significantly reduce its capabilities. More concerning were the additional symbol clusters they discovered along the dragon's path. The markings were becoming more complex, incorporating what appeared to be human mathematical concepts alongside alien geometric patterns. It was as if the creature was learning their language in real time, adapting its communication attempts based on observed human responses. Sergeant, called Rodriguez from 50 meters ahead. You need to see this immediately. Marcus joined him at the edge of a natural amphitheater where the dragon had apparently paused during its journey. The evidence of its presence was unmistakable: burned vegetation where its body heat had charred local plant life, deep impressions in the crystalline soil, and more symbol clusters carved into available surfaces. But what made Marcus's blood freeze was what the symbols depicted. The markings showed clear representations of human figures, colony structures, and what appeared to be tactical positions. The dragon hadn't just been observing the settlement, it had been conducting detailed reconnaissance and recording its findings in a written language it was developing specifically for human communication. It's been studying us, Marcus whispered. Learning our weaknesses, our defensive positions, our patrol patterns. Why would it do that unless it was planning an attack? Hayes asked. Marcus studied the symbols more carefully, noting their arrangement and relationship to the topographical features around the amphitheater. Something about the patterns bothered him, as if he was missing a crucial piece of information that would make the dragon's intentions clear. The answer came when Thomson's scanner detected electromagnetic emissions matching human communication frequencies. Sir, I'm picking up radio signals that match our communication protocols, but they're coming from biological sources. Explain that, Private. Someone or something is attempting to access our communication networks using naturally generated electromagnetic fields. The signal strength suggests close proximity, within 500 meters. Marcus felt the world shift around him as the implications became clear. The dragon wasn't just intelligent and strategic, it was technologically adaptive. It had somehow learned to interface with human electronic systems using its own biological capabilities. All teams, weapons hot and maximum alert. We're dealing with something that can potentially access our communication systems and has detailed knowledge of our defensive capabilities. The hunt had become a chess match between human technology and alien evolution, with the stakes being the survival of humanity's first deep space colony. But Marcus was beginning to suspect that they had underestimated their opponent in ways that might prove fatal. The radio crackled with static, and then, something impossible happened. A voice emerged from the interference, deep, resonant, and unmistakably alien, but speaking words that were clearly intended to be understood by human listeners. Soldiers of the metal ships. Marcus felt his heart stop. The dragon was talking. Warning, approach, with caution, territorial boundaries established, communication desired. Did that thing just try to negotiate with us? Rodriguez asked in disbelief. Marcus raised his hand for silence, listening as the alien voice continued its halting attempt at human speech. No harm intended to small colony, unless territory threatened. Wisdom suggests peaceful coexistence. Sir, Hayes whispered urgently, we need to report this to command immediately. But Marcus was studying the tactical situation with growing alarm. The dragon's radio communication had revealed its approximate location, which was much closer than anticipated. According to his scanner readings, the creature was positioned between the human forces and the colony, meaning any aggressive action would likely trigger the exact confrontation they were trying to prevent. Negative, Lieutenant. We maintain communication silence until we understand the situation fully. The alien voice continued, growing more confident as it adapted to human linguistic patterns. Ancient protocols demand territorial respect. Your species shows promise, but lacks understanding of proper boundaries. Marcus realized that the dragon wasn't just communicating, it was trying to educate them. The creature apparently operated according to some form of social structure that included concepts of territory, respect, and diplomatic interaction. Sergeant Thompson called out urgently, thermal imaging shows movement approximately 300 meters northeast. Whatever's talking to us is big enough to register as a small building. Marcus checked his tactical display and felt his stomach drop. The dragon's position put it in direct line of sight with the colony's main defensive installations. If it chose to attack from that location, it could disable the settlement's primary protection systems before they could respond effectively. But the creature's continued attempts at communication suggested it was genuinely trying to avoid conflict. The question was whether human command would recognize this opportunity or respond with automatic hostility to any alien threat. The answer came in the form of a high-priority transmission from Colonel Peterson. All teams, we've detected unauthorized radio communications on our frequencies. Terminate the source immediately and proceed with original elimination protocols. Marcus felt the moment crystallizing around him. Command had interpreted the dragon's communication attempts as a form of attack, and they were ordering its destruction based on that misunderstanding. In seconds, the first potential diplomatic contact between humans and an intelligent alien species would end in violence. He had to make a choice that would define not just his own fate, but potentially the future of human expansion into alien territory. All teams, disregard previous orders. I'm initiating emergency protocols under Article 7 of the Colonial Contact Guidelines. Sergeant, you don't have authority to countermand direct orders from command, Hayes protested. Article 7 grants field commanders discretionary authority when dealing with confirmed sentient alien contact. That thing is trying to talk to us, which makes this a first contact situation. Marcus activated his external speakers and responded to the alien voice, hoping his words would reach the creature before human weapons ended the conversation permanently. Dragon, this is Sergeant Chen of the Human Colonial Forces. We hear your communication and acknowledge your territorial claims. However, your presence near our settlement is causing alarm among our people. Static filled the airwaves for several seconds before the alien voice responded with noticeably improved pronunciation. Sergeant Chen, acknowledgement received, territorial concerns understood, proximity necessary for safe communication, your weapons systems present threat requiring careful positioning. Marcus felt a surge of hope mixed with terror. The dragon was not only intelligent but reasonable, demonstrating awareness of human security concerns while explaining its own strategic thinking. This was exactly the kind of contact that could revolutionize human understanding of alien life. Unfortunately, it was also the kind of situation that military protocols were designed to eliminate before it could develop into anything more complex. The sound of approaching aircraft filled the air as orbital support began moving into position. Marcus had perhaps minutes before human firepower would reduce this historic moment to another footnote in military casualty reports. He made the decision that would change everything. Dragon, human military forces are approaching with hostile intentions. If you wish to avoid conflict, you need to move away from our settlement immediately. Warning, appreciated. Sergeant Chen, however, movement will be interpreted as aggressive approach toward your position, tactical situation requires alternative solution. Marcus looked at his tactical display and realized the dragon was absolutely correct. Any movement on its part would bring it closer to the human teams, which would justify immediate lethal response under current engagement protocols. They were trapped in a situation where both sides wanted to avoid violence, but military positioning made peaceful resolution nearly impossible. Suggestions? Marcus asked, knowing he was probably committing career suicide by continuing the conversation. Face-to-face communication demonstrates peaceful intentions. Single human representative meets at neutral location, establishes formal territorial boundaries. Marcus stared at his radio in disbelief. The dragon was proposing a diplomatic meeting. The sound of aircraft engines grew louder, and Marcus realized he had seconds to make a decision that would either end his military career or mark the beginning of human-alien diplomatic relations. He looked at his team, seeing their confusion and growing alarm as they processed what was happening. Sergeant Rodriguez said quietly, "Whatever you're thinking, remember that thing killed our defensive systems like they were made of paper. Face-to-face contact might be suicide." Marcus nodded, understanding the risk. But he also understood that this moment might never come again. If humanity destroyed this creature, they would lose their first chance to prove they were capable of something more than conquest and exploitation. Dragon, I accept your proposal for face-to-face communication. Specify location and terms. The response came immediately, as if the creature had been hoping for exactly this answer. Crystalline formation, 700 meters northwest of your current position, single human representative, no weapons, formal territorial negotiation under ancient protocols. Marcus checked his chronometer. He had perhaps 2 minutes before air support arrived and made any negotiation impossible. All teams maintain current positions and do not engage unless directly threatened. I'm proceeding alone to establish communication with the alien entity. Sir, that's suicide, Hayes protested. Marcus removed his weapons and activated his suit's emergency beacon. If the dragon killed him, at least his death would be recorded and analyzed. If it didn't, he might be about to make history. If I don't return, tell command that humanity had a chance to do something better than genocide, and I took it. He began walking toward what might be his death, or toward the beginning of a new chapter in human evolution. Marcus walked across the crystalline landscape with his heart hammering against his ribs, every step taking him further from human support and closer to a creature that could end his life with casual ease. His suit's sensors detected electromagnetic anomalies ahead, confirming the dragon's presence behind a formation of natural crystal pillars that rose like alien monuments from the planet's surface. The sound of approaching aircraft grew louder, but Marcus forced himself to focus on the immediate challenge. In his peripheral vision, he could see his team maintaining overwatch positions, their weapons trained on the meeting location despite his orders. He couldn't blame them if the situation went wrong, they would need to respond instantly. As he rounded the crystal formation, Marcus got his first close look at the creature that had been terrorizing the colony. The dragon was magnificent and terrifying beyond anything the surveillance footage had conveyed. Standing nearly 20 feet tall at the shoulder, its albino scales seemed to contain their own light source, creating prismatic patterns that shifted with every subtle movement. Ancient scars marked its hide, telling stories of battles fought across centuries, while its pale blue eyes held intelligence that made Marcus feel like an insect under scientific scrutiny. But what struck him most was the creature's posture. It wasn't positioned for attack or defense, it was sitting in what could only be described as a formal diplomatic stance, with its massive head held high and its wings folded respectfully behind its body. Everything about its bearing suggested that it understood the gravity of this moment as clearly as Marcus did. Sergeant Chen, the dragon spoke, its voice emerging from some internal mechanism that generated electromagnetic frequencies rather than sound waves. Your courage honors both our species. Few beings have the wisdom to choose communication over conflict when faced with the unknown. Marcus stopped approximately 10 meters from the creature, close enough for clear communication but far enough to hopefully survive if things went wrong. You've been studying our language remarkably quickly.
How long have you been listening to our communications?
Since your metal ships first touched this world's soil. Your species broadcasts continuously, making linguistic acquisition relatively simple for beings with sufficient neural capacity. The dragon's casual revelation that it had been monitoring human communications from the moment of first landing sent chills through Marcus. This creature had been watching, learning, and preparing for exactly this kind of encounter while humanity remained completely unaware of its intelligence.
Why didn't you attempt communication earlier?
The livestock raids and damaged perimeter systems suggested hostile intentions.
The dragon's massive head tilted in what might have been alien amusement. Your species demonstrates aggressive responses to perceived threats.
Initial contact required careful evaluation of human tactical capabilities and social structures to ensure productive dialogue. Marcus felt a grudging respect for the creature's strategic thinking. It had been conducting the same kind of reconnaissance and risk assessment that any military commander would perform before engaging with an unknown force.
And what conclusions did you reach about humanity?
Your species shows remarkable adaptability and technological advancement, but limited understanding of territorial protocols. You establish settlements without consulting existing inhabitants or acknowledging prior claims to planetary resources. The dragon's criticism was delivered without hostility, but Marcus recognized it as a fundamental challenge to human expansion policies.
From our perspective, we detected no signs of intelligent life before establishing the colony. Absence of technology does not indicate absence of intelligence, Sergeant Chen. This world has been my territory for 400 of your years. My presence was clearly marked according to ancient protocols recognized throughout this galactic region. Marcus thought about the symbol clusters they had discovered during the hunt. The markings we found, those were territorial boundary markers?
Correct. Your species either lacks the knowledge to interpret such markings or chooses to ignore them.
Both possibilities suggest significant diplomatic challenges for future expansion efforts.
The sound of aircraft engines reached critical proximity, and Marcus knew his time was running out.
Dragon, human military forces will arrive within minutes with orders to destroy you. If you have proposals for peaceful coexistence, this is the moment to present them.
The creature's eyes brightened with what appeared to be approval.
Your directness is appreciated, Sergeant Chen.
Most species require extensive cultural exchange before achieving such clarity of communication. The dragon rose to its full impressive height and spread its wings partially, creating a display that combined majesty with subtle intimidation.
I propose formal territorial recognition under the ancient protocols.
Your colony maintains current boundaries while acknowledging my sovereignty over the southern continental region.
Livestock raids cease in exchange for guaranteed non-interference with my territorial integrity. Marcus considered the proposal, recognizing its basic fairness while understanding the political impossibilities it represented. The concept is reasonable, but human colonial administration may not accept territorial limitations imposed by alien authority.
Then, perhaps, the dragon said, lowering its head until its massive eyes were level with Marcus's helmet, demonstration of consequences for territorial violation would clarify the situation. The implicit threat was unmistakable, but Marcus detected no malice in the creature's tone. It was simply stating facts about power dynamics that would determine the outcome of any extended conflict.
Aircraft engines roared overhead as human air support arrived on scene.
Marcus could hear radio chatter indicating weapons lock and attack authorization, giving him perhaps 30 seconds before the negotiation ended in violence. Dragon, our aircraft will attack immediately unless you demonstrate non-hostile intentions.
Your current posture may be interpreted as aggressive preparation.
Understood.
Observe carefully, Sergeant Chen, and remember what you witness.
The dragon moved with fluid grace that defied its massive size, shifting from formal diplomatic stance to what Marcus initially thought was surrender posture. The creature lowered its body until its chest touched the crystalline ground, extended its neck forward, and folded its wings completely against its sides. But, as the submissive position solidified, Marcus realized he was witnessing something far more significant than simple surrender.
the dragon was bowing. The gesture was unmistakably ceremonial, performed with precision that suggested deep cultural meaning. The creature's head touched the ground in front of Marcus's feet while its entire body remained rigidly formal, creating a display of respect that transcended species barriers. By the ancient protocols, the dragon intoned, "I acknowledge the courage and wisdom of Sergeant Marcus Chen, representative of humanity. Your species has produced an individual capable of choosing communication over conquest, demonstrating evolutionary potential worthy of territorial recognition." Marcus felt the weight of the moment crushing down on him. This wasn't just diplomacy, it was a formal ceremony that apparently held galactic significance. The dragon was offering humanity something that required centuries of cultural development to achieve: recognition as a mature spacefaring civilization. Aircraft weapons systems powered up overhead, their targeting systems locked onto the dragon's position. Marcus had seconds to prevent the destruction of humanity's first alien ally. "All aircraft, hold fire," he commanded through his emergency authorization codes. "Repeat, hold fire. Alien entity is demonstrating formal surrender and requesting diplomatic contact under interstellar law." "Sergeant Chen, you are not authorized to prevent execution of direct orders," came Colonel Peterson's voice through the comm system. "Sir, this creature is offering formal territorial recognition under what it calls ancient protocols. If such protocols exist and are recognized by other galactic civilizations, destroying this entity could mark humanity as a species that murders diplomatic representatives." Marcus held his breath as silence stretched across the communication channels. He was essentially gambling his career and, possibly his life, on the hope that military command would recognize the potential consequences of destroying an alien diplomat. The dragon remained motionless in its formal bow, demonstrating patience that suggested this was a familiar procedure from its perspective. "Explain the terms being proposed," Peterson finally responded. Marcus looked down at the magnificent creature that had humbled itself before human authority, understanding that his next words would determine whether humanity took its first step toward galactic civilization or marked itself as a species too primitive for diplomatic recognition. "Sir, the entity proposes territorial division that allows the colony to maintain current operations while acknowledging alien sovereignty over regions we haven't yet developed. In exchange for respecting these boundaries, it guarantees cessation of raids against our livestock and infrastructure." "And if we refuse?" Marcus studied the dragon's posture, recognizing the controlled power in its apparently submissive position. "Sir, this creature destroyed our defensive installations without effort while demonstrating strategic intelligence that matches human military capabilities. It's offering negotiation instead of conquest." Another pause stretched across the airways as command processed the implications. "Sergeant Chen, you are hereby granted temporary diplomatic authority under emergency protocols. Negotiate preliminary terms and report findings for administrative review." Marcus felt relief flooding through his system as immediate violence was averted. "Dragon, human command has authorized preliminary territorial negotiation. Are you willing to maintain current position while formal terms are discussed?" The creature's massive head rose slowly from its bowed position, pale eyes meeting Marcus's helmet visor with obvious satisfaction. "Your species continues to demonstrate wisdom, Sergeant Chen. I accept preliminary negotiation status and will maintain peaceful posture during formal discussions." The dragon shifted into a more comfortable resting position while maintaining clear submissive body language. "However, I must inform you that other entities throughout this galactic region monitor territorial disputes for compliance with ancient protocols. Humanity's handling of this situation will determine your species' reputation among civilizations you have yet to encounter." Marcus felt the true weight of the situation settling over him. This wasn't just about one dragon and one colony, it was humanity's first test of whether they could function as responsible members of a galactic community. What exactly are these ancient protocols? Territorial recognition agreements established over millennia by spacefaring civilizations to prevent unnecessary conflict during expansion phases. Your species' adherence to these protocols will determine whether future human expansion encounters cooperation or resistance. Marcus nodded, understanding that humanity was essentially taking its first diplomatic exam on a galactic scale. The dragon's submissive bow hadn't been surrender, it had been a gesture of respect for a species that had proven capable of choosing wisdom over violence.
Dragon, I accept your territorial proposals as basis for formal negotiation. On behalf of humanity, I recognize your sovereign status and request establishment of formal diplomatic relations.
The dragon's response surprised Marcus with its obvious emotion.
The creature's eyes brightened, and what might have been satisfaction colored its electronic voice.
Sergeant Chen, you have honor that transcends species boundaries.
Your name will be recorded in territorial archives as the human who chose to build bridges rather than burn them. As aircraft circled overhead and human forces maintained watchful positions, Marcus found himself sitting across from humanity's first alien diplomat, discussing the establishment of interstellar law on a crystalline plane that would forever mark the moment when humanity proved itself worthy of galactic citizenship. The dragon that had terrified a colony was now humanity's first ally among the stars, and it all began because one soldier chose to listen instead of shoot. In the years that followed, the territorial agreements negotiated on Zirion would become the foundation for humanity's expansion throughout the galaxy. The ancient protocols, once learned, opened doors to civilizations that had been watching humanity's development with careful interest. And, in the archives of those ancient civilizations, the name of Sergeant Marcus Chen was recorded alongside other individuals whose courage had elevated their entire species to new levels of evolutionary achievement. The dragon, whose name was eventually learned to be something approximating Keeper of the Crystal Territories, became humanity's first interstellar ambassador, teaching human diplomats the complex cultural patterns that govern civilized interaction between spacefaring species. The colonists of New Terra learned to appreciate their magnificent neighbor, whose presence actually provided protection against far more dangerous entities that occasionally wandered into their region of space. Children grew up hearing stories of the great white dragon who chose friendship over conquest, setting an example that would guide human expansion for generations. But it all began with one moment of choice when a human soldier faced the unknown and decided that communication was more powerful than any weapon, and when an ancient dragon recognized that courage and honored it with the respect of equals.